How's it going, everybody? Blaine here for Bridge4 Games. Today we're going to be talking about the absolute best Pokemon to bring with you shiny hunting to make sure that you never ever miss another shiny Pokemon again. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. It definitely feels like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are trying to make up from Pokemon Sword and Shield not really having very many shiny hunting methods, because this game has an absolute ton of them. You have the shiny mass outbreaks, you have the picnic trick where you can set up a picnic, take it back down to reset your spawns, and on top of that you have sandwiches that can make it so easy to get shiny Pokemon, it is crazy. But of course, once you find those shiny Pokemon, you are going to have to catch them, and that's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. All Pokemon are not created equal, and some are going to make it a lot easier for you to get shinies than others. So today we're going to go ahead and jump in. I'm going to show you every single Pokemon that I think you should bring with you next time you go shiny hunting, and I'm going to show you guys possible sets that you can give that Pokemon to make sure that you have as many options as possible when you are facing down those wild Pokemon. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to dive right in, but before I do, I just want to take 1 second to ask if you like the videos we have here on the channel. Please make sure that you actually like them by hitting that thumbs up button, and of course consider subscribing because it really does help us out. And you'll make sure that you never miss any of our awesome videos just like this one. But as I mentioned, we have a ton we have to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, now to kick things off, I want to cover some of the moves you want to have on your Pokemon, really just to give you kind of the best tools available to actually get your shinies. Now, first and foremost, obviously we're going to be talking about False Swipe. Now, False Swipe is a move that is always going to leave a Pokemon with at least 1 HP. Now, obviously, this is incredibly useful because it'll make sure that you never knock out a Pokemon. This will maximize your odds of catching that Pokemon, making it a lot easier and making your Pokeballs a lot more effective. Now, in addition to that, you're going to want to have a Pokemon that has status moves. Statusing is one way you can drastically increase your odds of catching a Pokemon, and a lot of Pokemon have a lot of different ways of using it. Now, there are several different statuses. We have things like Freeze, Burn, Paralysis, and Sleep. However, we don't really want to deal with Freeze or Burn because Freeze is not consistent, and Burn can actually knock out a Pokemon, so we don't want to mess with those. So we're really going to be just dealing with Sleep and Paralysis, and some of the moves that are going to be more common for implementing those are going to be things like Sleep Powder, Spore, Thunder Wave, Nuzzle, stuff like that. All right, now a lot of people like to just cut it off here and say that's good enough. And honestly, this is about 90% of what you're going to be dealing with, but there are a couple other things I like to just mention because a lot of the Pokemon we're going to be talking about have this anyways, and it can just make it so you don't randomly get blown out by kind of a random curveball here or there. Now, I also like to have the option of changing the weather. Now, in Scarlet and Violet, we did get some changes to hail. It's been moved to snow, and that no longer chips away at Pokemon, so you don't really have that worry about having a Pokemon accidentally get knocked out. However, in the games, there are still sandstorms, and they can very easily knock out a Pokemon by accident. It's actually really frustrating because for some reason, in a lot of the desert areas, there's Pokemon that aren't, rock or ground type and will get chipped away. So I don't know why they would be there in the first place, but that's going to make it very, very hard for you to knock the Pokemon down to 1 with False Swipe and then keep it alive. So having the option to change the weather really easily is just something that'll make it that much more consistent for you to actually catch these Pokemon. And last but not least, the Paldea region does have a ton of ghosts, so being able to actually hit them with False Swipe is something that's going to be very, very helpful. Now, there are Pokemon with Scrappy who are able to hit ghosts, but they are pretty few and far between, and in previous generations we had moves like Odor Sleuth and Foresight to let us hit ghosts, but now both of those have been pretty much removed from the game, so we don't have that as an option anymore. Fortunately, though, there is an item called Ring Target, and all that item really does is remove a Pokemon's immunities. So what we can do is actually give it to our Pokemon as a held item, and then use the move either Switcheroo or Trick to give it to a wild Pokemon so we can actually hit it with False Swipe. It's kind of random, but really it's pretty much the best option we actually have to let us hit those ghosts with False Swipe, and even though it's kind of weird to set up, if you do fail, it's not that big a deal because typically we're going to be saving once we find a shiny anyways, so we really have kind of unlimited chances to actually make this work, which is a nice little safety net we have in place. And with that, I just want to mention, this is as comprehensive as I can get, kind of in this video. There are a lot of corner case situations you may want to just be aware of when you're hunting a particular Pokemon. There's Pokemon who have things like Explosion or Pokemon that have recoil moves like Takedown. By and large, there's an answer for every single one of those situations, but they're not going to really be, shiny hunting type Pokemon who have a lot of these attributes that I've mentioned so far. You're going to have to go out and kind of figure out what situation is going to apply to whatever Pokemon you're looking for. But that being said, everything we've covered so far is going to cover well over 99% of the encounters you have, which, in my opinion, is pretty darn good. Alright, so now let's go ahead and get started talking about the Pokemon, and we're going to talk about the Pokemon that I consider to be the gold standard of shiny hunting, and that is BRELOOM. Now, BRELOOM is just fantastic because it really has the most amount of tools available to it, and really is just one of the best shiny Pokemon you can ever have. So first and foremost, obviously it gets False Swipe, but more than that, it has a really good attack to go with False Swipe, making sure that you're not going to have to hit it like 100 times. And on top of that, it also has the ability Technician, which makes its weaker moves more powerful. so your False Swipe is going to get a power boost in addition to having that already high attack stat. Typically, this means that with most Pokemon, you're going to be able to knock it down to 1 HP after only like 2 attacks, which is great because that gives you more turns to actually throw Pokeballs at it. Now, in addition, it also has the move Spore, which is a fairly uncommon move these days, but it is a 100% accurate sleeping move, which is just fantastic. Now, Sleep is more effective than Paralysis at, statusing Pokemon. That being said, it is always a bit of a trade-off because Pokemon can wake up. So that being said, it kind of depends on what you want to do. You can paralyze them, and that way you don't have to worry about, doing it again. You can just throw Pokeballs, or you can put them to sleep over and over again and increase your odds that way, but you are going to have to do it several times. Because the fact you're going to have to do it several times, it really is much more preferable to have something that's 100% accurate like it is here with BRELOOM. And in addition to that, for its other random moves it does have weather setting abilities, which are fantastic. It has Rain Dance and Sunny Day. And it even has the move Worry Seed, where it can actually take away Pokemon's abilities. Now, there are a lot of random abilities out there that can cause you problems, and just having the option to take that away is just really pretty darn incredible. Now, some other things it does have access to. If you are worried about the Pokemon waking up from something like Early Bird, it does have access to Stun Spore, so you can switch back and forth between that and Spore. And it also has things like Brick Break to be able to get rid of screens if you want to do damage more efficiently. Now, a possible set that you may want to bring with you is going to be a BRELOOM with Technician. Whatever you do, do not use its ability Effect Spore. What that ability does, if it's actually hit, it randomly is going to possibly status the Pokemon. Now, normally that's not too bad. You may think it's pretty cool because you may put it to sleep or paralyze it. However, you could accidentally poison it, and then you're going to accidentally KO it, which is not something you want to do. So just make sure you have Technician. You are not going to regret it. Then as far as the held item, we can go for recovery options like Leftovers. I also put on here a Silk Scarf so you can make your normal type attacks more powerful, which again is just going to make that False Swipe do that much more damage. Now again, for its attacks, we do want to, of course, have False Swipe. Then you have the option of Spore or Stun Spore, Rain Dance or Worry Seed. And on here, I did put Brick Break, just so you have the option of having a stab move if you do have a Pokemon that has a very high defensive stat, like maybe something like Garganacl. And of course, you can remove any of those random things that may show up, like screens or Aurora Veil. Now, even though BRELOOM is by far the gold standard, there are still a ton of other Pokemon that are very good. And another example of that is going to be GALLADE. Alright, now GALLADE, much like BRELOOM, has a very high attack stat and access to False Swipe. Now, we already know why this is good, but GALLADE does have quite a few things that make it very unique. Now, it does have access to both Thunder Wave and Hypnosis. I do recommend Thunder Wave being kind of your normal option here, just because, again, it's a lot more accurate. However, if you do run into something like a Pokemon that can't be paralyzed, maybe it has like Limber, or an Electric-type Pokemon that can't be paralyzed, having the access to Hypnosis is a really good option as well. Now, it does have Sunny Day and Rain Dance, so you are going to be able to change that weather. And it also has access to tricks, so you are going to be able to use that ring target trick if you want to go ahead and hit ghosts with your False Swipe move. And on top of that, it also gets access to moves like Thief and Mean Look, so if you're worried about a Pokemon fleeing from one of its abilities, or if you're worried about a Pokemon just having an item you want to take, it does have access to both of those as well. Now, as far as the sample set, GALLADE is going to want to have typically an Adamant nature because you are going to want to have its attack as high as possible. In addition, the held item is typically going to be that ring target, just because it is a really awesome option if you are hunting those ghosts. Now, as far as moves, we're going to be looking at False Swipe, Trick, and of course we have our status move. This time I did go for Thunder Wave, but if you want to go for Hypnosis, that is also fine. And of course we have our weather manipulating move, Rain Dance. And now we know GALLADE is awesome in the present, so it stands to reason that GALLADE would be good in the future as well, right? Well, that is absolutely true, and that brings us to our next Pokemon, Iron Valiant. Now, Iron Valiant is going to be the first new Pokemon we're talking about, and it's very similar to GALLADE, but still kind of different in its own way. Now, instead of a Psychic and Fighting type, it is now a Fairy and Fighting type. So it does have that Dragon Resistance, which is really cool to just kind of keep in mind because if you are going down against a Dragon Pokemon, that is going to kind of reduce the amount of moves it can use on you, giving you, again, more longevity. Now, you're probably getting sick and tired of me saying this, but again, it does have False Swipe with very high attack stat, and it has access to status moves like Thunder Wave and Hypnosis. Now, in particular, I highly recommend you use only Thunder Wave with this Pokemon, for reasons we're going to get to in just a moment. But I also like that this Pokemon, much like GALLADE, also has tricks, so you are going to be able to make that ring target thing work again. And even though this Pokemon is not able to change the weather, it's just not something it has access to, it does have that incredible ability Quark Drive, which we're going to be able to take advantage of using Electric Terrain. Now, it doesn't have it as an ability, it has Electric Terrain as a move, but when we get Electric Terrain up, it is going to activate our Quark Drive and give a basically +1 boost to whatever stat is highest. Now, this is really awesome because it gives us a lot of versatility in this Pokemon. We can kind of shape it however we want. Most of the time, I imagine we are going to have the highest attack stat out of all of our stats, so it is going to make our attack stat even higher, meaning we are going to be able to knock that Pokemon down to 1 HP using False Swipe very quickly. Now, unfortunately though, that is the reason why I recommend Thunder Wave with this set, just because when you have Electric Terrain up, you're not going to be able to put Pokemon to sleep, so it doesn't matter how accurate your Hypnosis is, it's not going to be able to do anything when you're using it with this Pokemon. But that being said, for the actual set itself, again, I do recommend an Adamant Nature, or really whatever nature will get its attack stat as high as possible. For the held item, I do like Ring Target here as well. And for the moves, I recommend False Swipe, Trick, Thunder Wave, and Electric Terrain. Really just because that Electric Terrain is going to give you a lot of versatility with your stats, and is really just a very cool tool to have. Now, it doesn't have as many shiny hunting options as GALLADE does, but you still can fill that 4th slot with whatever you want. You can give it a stab move, really whatever, just as long as you're careful not to knock that Pokemon out. And you know what, I've had so much fun talking about new Pokemon, let's talk about another one. As it turns out, another awesome shiny hunting Pokemon is going to be Kingambit. So as it turns out, the long-awaited evolution to Bisharp is actually a really amazing Pokemon when it comes to shiny hunting. It has a very high attack stat at 135 paired with False Swipe, which as we know is an amazing combination. But in addition, just looking at its base stats and its typing, it does have pretty high defenses and a very good HP stat. In addition, as a Dark and Steel type Pokemon, it does have that very glaring fighting weakness which you can correct with Terra, but its base typing also gives it access to 9 different resistances, which is just awesome. Again, we are talking about longevity, making every turn count, so you don't want to have to spend your turns, potioning up your Pokemon, and in the case of a Pokemon with this many resistances and this great of stats, you're not going to have to. Now, as far as its moves, it is kind of basic. It does have False Swipe with Thunder Wave. It also has access to weather-changing moves in the form of Rain Dance this time, and unfortunately, it doesn't really have anything amazing for that 4th slot. However, I did come up with some pretty good options kind of based on its move pool. So it is a pretty slow Pokemon, and it is a little bit weaker on the special defensive side than the physically defensive side. So it is very fitting then that it has access to things like Snarl and Scary Face, so you can actually manipulate the target Pokemon's special attack stat or its speed, just to make it a little bit easier for your Pokemon to survive. It also gets access to the move Rest, which I think is really cool, just because it's a way you can heal up without really having to do a whole lot of, going into your bag and using items. Now when it comes to its sample set, you're going to want to make sure for its ability, do not give it Pressure. It can have a couple different abilities, one of which is Pressure, the other one is Defiant. I really recommend using Defiant because if any of your stats get dropped, a lot of moves can kind of just do that incidentally. It's going to become more physically strong, so you are going to have a stronger False Swipe. The reason you don't want to have that ability Pressure under any circumstances is because it's going to deplete the wild Pokemon's PP a lot more quickly, meaning it's much more likely to actually end up struggling itself out. Now, as far as the held item, I really like Lumberry here. The reason why, you don't want to ever have a chance of this thing getting burned because that would be really bad. But in addition, I actually recommended using Rest on this set because you are going to be taking advantage of its very high defenses, and being able to recover a lot of that damage you've taken over the course of the battle is going to be very helpful, and being able to immediately wake up from sleep like that is going to be fantastic. For the rest of the moves, I have False Swipe. I also have on here Thunder Wave and Rain Dance. I think all of those are going to be really great. Rain Dance is going to help it get a little more longevity if it does come across fire Pokemon. And of course, we need Status and False Swipe to be able to catch our Pokemon. Now, if you're a longtime shiny hunter like myself, a lot of these Pokemon choices I have so far may not be that surprising to you. But that being said, let's go ahead and kick it over to some more unorthodox choices. And the first of those is going to be Persian, the Cantonian form, who is honestly really surprisingly great when it comes to shiny hunting. So it does have an okay attack stat, but it does have a very high speed stat, meaning that you're going to be acting first most of the time, which is really cool because even if you get knocked out, you're going to be able to get your attack in there first, meaning that, the loss from getting your Pokemon knocked out isn't going to be as bad as it would be if you had moved second. But one thing I really liked here is that just like BRELOOM, it has access to Technician, meaning that False Swipe is going to do a lot more damage than it normally would. But what's really amazing here is that because Persian is normal type, that False Swipe is also going to get Stab. So not only is it going to get the 50% boost from Stab, it's also going to get that Technician boost, making it extremely powerful for a False Swipe. Now, as far as status moves, it does have Thunder Wave and Hypnosis, so it pretty much has both ends covered. You can really use whatever one you want. It also has the ability to change the weather with Sunny Day and Rain Dance, and most awesomely, it also has access to Switcheroo, so our sort of ring target strategy is going to be able to work with Persian, which was pretty surprising to me. I didn't know it had access to this many tools for shiny hunting. Now, as far as the sample set, as I mentioned, you are going to want to have that Technician on there, and for the held item, you're going to want to have Ring Target. Again, shiny Pokemon can kind of just pop up all over the place. You never really know when you may run into one, and ghosts come out pretty much anytime it is dark at night, so you always want to have this sort of strategy prepared. Just in case one does show up, you'll be able to catch it just like that. Now for the actual moves, of course, we are going to be using False Swipe, which is going to be extremely powerful here, and have Switcheroo. I also put on here Thunder Wave. Again, I do think that tends to be the default, but if you want to have Hypnosis, that's an option for you. And for the weather changing, I went ahead and just put Rain Dance on here, but if you want to use something like, Sunny Day, that's fine as well. It doesn't really matter. Just something to stop that sand from killing the Pokemon is going to be all you really need. Now, continuing our trend of some normal type sleeper picks, we have Zangoose. Now, in terms of what Zangoose actually brings to shiny hunting, to be perfectly honest, it is kind of like Persian Light, because it does a lot of the same things that Persian does, just not as well. But that being said, it does have a couple things that it makes uniquely its own. Now, one thing I did forget to mention with Persian is that as normal Pokemon, they are going to be immune to Ghost-type moves, and they are going to be only weak to fighting, which is pretty awesome. Again, it's only going to take super effective damage from one type, so for the most part, you're going to be able to really weather a lot of hits and stay in the game without having to switch out or, possibly risk getting blacked out and losing all your Pokemon. One thing that's very cool about Zangoose, though, as far as its ability, it actually has something called immunity, which basically means that it can't be poisoned. Now, this isn't really that big a deal, but there are a lot of Pokemon you could run into that when you actually make contact with them, they do poison you. So just having it so that isn't really on the table is kind of a nice little thing to have, again, kind of in your back pocket. Now, it does have access to False Swipe and Thunder Wave as well, so kind of our basic two moves are there. It also has access to weather-changing moves in Sunny Day and Rain Dance, and again, it also has access to Switcheroo, so much like Persian, we do have the option to use Ring Target if we need to. But one other thing I really did like about Zangoose, as far as just random coverage moves go, it has a very expansive move pool. It has fire coverage, electric coverage, and ice coverage. So if you are running into a particular Pokemon that has maybe very high stats, you need to do a lot of damage to it, you do have pretty much any kind of coverage you need just to do whatever damage to it and then kind of clean it up with the False Swipe. Now, as far as sample sets go, it is going to look a lot like Persian because that is sort of the default, but please feel free to customize this however you want, just to kind of suit it to whatever your needs are. That being said, I do have on here immunity for its ability, and I have, of course, that Ring Target as its held item just because it is so useful. And then I have False Swipe, Thunder Wave, Switcheroo, and Rain Dance for its 4 attacks. Again, I think those are probably the best, stock ones to bring with you, but if you are hunting a particular Pokemon that may be extremely defensive, take a look at its move pool, grab anything else because you have a ton of options available. But you know what? One thing Zangoose does have that Persian doesn't have is that it looks exactly like David Bowie's Starman. And you know what? That is awesome enough to give it a lot of extra bonus points. And that's actually going to go ahead and bring us to the final Pokemon we're going to talk about today. That is, in my mind, the biggest surprise on this entire list, and that is going to be Jolteon. Now, I am as surprised as you I'm putting it on here because I didn't think this Pokemon was that good for shiny hunting, and as it turns out, I was pretty wrong. Now, admittedly, it does have a pretty poor attack stat, but it does have access to False Swipe, and it also has access to Thunder Wave and Yawn. I do really like that it has two different options for statusing a Pokemon. Again, just because you don't want to be stuck with one and not the other, just in case you have a Pokemon that can't either be put to sleep or paralyzed. Another thing I really like here is that it's incredibly fast. Now this means that you're going to be able to get off your attacks first and get off your status moves really quickly, and hopefully that'll give you more longevity in your battle. Now it also can change the weather with things like Sunny Day and Rain Dance, again like a lot of the other Pokemon on this list. But one thing I thought was really cool also is that it has access to Volt Absorb. Now, as a pure Electric-type Pokemon, it does only have one weakness, and that is Ground, but being able to entirely resist electric moves on top of that is really cool, just because it gives you a ton of options if you are going to be facing down like a bulkier, stronger Electric-type Pokemon, where even though it would be resisted anyways, it just gives you a lot of options to really capitalize on that really cool ability and give you a lot more longevity in the battle. Now, talking about some potential sets here, I think Jolteon has a lot of options for a held item. I did put on here Leftovers or Air Balloon. I also think a very cool option could be that Silk Scarf. Again, just due to the fact that it doesn't have that high of an attack stat, you are going to want to be able to do as much damage as possible. So increasing the power of its normal type damage is going to be really helpful. Now, when you're actually building this as well, normally a lot of people like to go something like Timid. If you are going to be using a Jolteon strictly for shiny hunting, I'd recommend actually going Adamant with it. As crazy as that sounds, again, you do just want to make that attack stat as high as possible to make sure those False Swipes do as much damage as possible. Now, for the actual attacks, I did put on here False Swipe, Rainy Day, and Thunder Wave. Again, those can be customized however you want. But for that last slot, I actually think it has a lot of options available to you. I did put on here possibly using something like Thunderbolt. You know, because False Swipe is not going to do that much damage, you are going to want to take out a good chunk of the HP without knocking it out if you can. So something like a Thunderbolt is probably going to do a lot to a target and not kill it, meaning you can get it down to maybe like the orange or the red, and then be able to get down to 1 HP on the following attack with a False Swipe. Another thing I thought was really cool as well, because Jolteon doesn't have that much bulk, you're going to want to figure out any way you can to stretch out the battle and have it take as many hits as possible. A good option for this is using either Charm or Eerie Impulse. One thing that is very cool and unique to Jolteon is that it has two different attacks, both of which can either lower an attack stat by 2 or a special attack stat by 2. meaning that really, whatever one you choose, you're going to be able to pretty much immediately half that Pokemon's attack stat or special attack stat, giving you just kind of that much more longevity in battle. But, you know, please, go ahead and experiment with it. Just kind of see whatever you want to run on this Pokemon, because I'm just so happy it made the list, because I like Jolteon a lot, and I actually think it's a really awesome Pokemon for shiny hunting, and I was really, really surprised when I saw this, and I was so glad it made the cut. But all right, there you have it, everybody. Those are the absolute best Pokemon you can bring with you when you are going shiny hunting in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And again, you know, we have a ton of options in this game for finding shiny Pokemon, and I just want to make sure that you are able to catch them when you do find them 100% of the time. So that being said, down in the comments below, I want to hear which set was your favorite, which Pokemon was your favorite, and what Pokemon you were going to be bringing with you when you go shiny hunting in the games. And while you're down there, if you did enjoy the video, please make sure that you absolutely impact that like button in the face. And of course, while you're also doing that, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well, because again, it really does help us out. It lets YouTube know that you guys love our content, and you'll make sure that you never miss any of our awesome videos just like this one. That being said, everybody, I've been Blaine for Bridge4Games. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me. As always, please remember our motto here is that the best Pokemon games are the ones that you love to play, and the proper ways to play them are however you have the most fun. I hope each and every one of you watching have a happy, epic, awesome, and amazing day. I hope each and every one of you are massively enjoying your trips through the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games. And as always, until next time, I will see you in the next video. See you around. Bye-bye.